Well, howdy there, everybody. It's your boy James again with another PsycBiz episode. So, today we're going to be talking all about fighting addictions. So, by now, after watching dozens of my videos, you probably already know how big of an issue addictions really are in our society, and unfortunately, how we just don't really have that many great tools to deal with them. So today I'm going to be talking with a man named Mark Haden. He is the VP of Business Development at this company called Clearmind Medicine. And Clearmind has a nifty little new molecule, some could call it a next generation psychedelic, which they believe might hold the key to defeating certain types of addictions, including alcohol use disorder. So without further ado, let's bring on the man of the hour, Mr. Mark Haden. Mark, how are you doing today?
Very well, James. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. And as everybody I'm sure is about to find out, you're an absolutely great communicator. So please come back to talk about psychedelics whenever you wish. With that being said, why don't you just give us a little bit of a rundown, the cliff notes of who Clearmind is and maybe what your role in the company is, maybe what the vision of the company is.
Sure. So Clearmind Medicine was started around one particular molecule. There was an invention of this thing called MEAI. It doesn't have a street name, drat, but it's a 5-methoxy 2-amino-indane, a catchy title at best. And it was invented and then sold to psychonauts on the internet who like to experience new psychoactive substances. And then this kind of strange anti-addictive quality of it started to be noticed. And the folks who are noticing it were skilled enough to see the impact. And I liken it to Ian Fleming's discovery of penicillin, because he noticed something on a petri dish. He noticed a little blob that was killing the bacteria around, and he was smart enough to recognize what that meant. So there are a group of people that are just noticing what's going on in the world of new psychoactive molecules, and the description of the anti-addictive qualities of MEAI was noticed enough that there was a kind of an informal study that was done. And what they did is they knew a woman who was in a Black neighborhood in the United States, and they asked her if she would participate, and she said yes. So they set her up to have a series of parties with her neighbors. And so she would invite her neighbors over, and there was a table full of alcohol and a table full of food. And I asked her, how many of the people coming would you describe as having alcoholism, alcohol use disorder? And she said over 50%. And there was only 2 deals. Come to the party, eat anything you want, drink anything you want, hang out with your neighbors. And there are 2 deals. Deal number 1 is she got to dose people with MEI as they walked in the door. And deal number 2 is they had to fill out a questionnaire as they left. And what she noticed is people drank less, a lot less actually, and they enjoyed the experience more. They also ate less, which we actually didn't know about. So let me describe the experience of MEAI. If you take 1 dose, it feels like you've had 1 beer. If you take 2 doses, it feels like you've had 2 beers. If you take 3 doses, it feels a bit like 50 milligrams of MDMA. So that means you're feeling more. You don't love it, but you like it. So you're feeling close to people and very safe and relaxed and disinhibited and connected and comfortable. And it's a very it's a pleasant experience. It's not a hugely pleasant experience, but it's a pleasant experience, enough to take another dose. So you take another dose, and the bizarre transition of the experience is actually very memorable. The best way that I've ever described it is you've just finished eating 2 pieces of chocolate-covered goopy cheesecake, and somebody puts a 3rd piece of cheesecake in front of you and hands you a fork. You look at the cheesecake, and you can't imagine touching it. You just have this whole visceral response to that 3rd piece of cheesecake. But why? Imagine yourself in that position and ask yourself, why can't you touch the cheesecake? You're not so sedated, you're lying on the floor. You're not so stimulated, you're hanging off the ceiling. You're not so sick that you're kneeling in front of the toilet. You're just simply done. You're satiated. MEAI triggers a satiation response. So one of the early experiments was the inventor of it found a group of Russian alcoholics who had a routine. They got together every 3 or 4 days with a bottle of 26 ounces of vodka. And their deal was they all drank their own bottles. They finished. And this person showed up at their event and basically said, "Can I add something to your drinks?" And he had enough credibility that they said yes. They liked it, which is crucial. They liked it, and they all stopped drinking. And so you can actually dose MDMA, you can MEAI, you can dose it so you can predict how much you'll drink in advance. I mean, I worked for years, for actually decades, in the addiction services in Vancouver Coastal Health in Vancouver. And I had so many alcoholics say to me, 1 drink is too many and 45 is too few. Once you start drinking and you're alcoholic, you completely lose control until you're obliterated. With MEAI, you can choose in advance how much you're going to drink. And then you take the appropriate dose of MEAI and you simply stop. Now, curious enough, there are other medications available for alcoholism, things like dalsulfuron, which is antabuse. And yes, you stop drinking if you take antabuse, but you hate it. It's obnoxious. You're violently ill and you never want to repeat the experience. It's a horrible experience. So here's a substance that makes you stop drinking, but you like it. It adds to the experience. There's nothing else like that in the world of addictions. In fact, there are a few other medicines, acamprosate and naltrexone, that numb the pleasure of alcohol, so they make the whole thing less pleasurable. And it works for some people, but it doesn't sell well, let's put it that way, because something like MEI doesn't exist anymore in the world of addictions treatment. Something that allows you to drink, adds to the experience, and then simply results in this abrupt satiation when you're completely done.
So would this be something then that you add to your alcohol? So let's say I'm going to a bar or something, I would add a little bit of MEAI to my beer each time, or would it be a complete replacement? I would have my own bottle of MEAI plus or whatever we want to call it.
Interesting question. And the answer is both. So Clearmind Medicine is actually somewhat unique in the world of psychedelic companies because they have a lot of patents. They've really protected what they have invented here. And so one of the patents is called Binge mitigation. And so it's for many addictions. So the assumption is that you are about to go on a binge, and it can be alcohol, eating, shopping, smoking, and sex are all of the different behaviors that people may want to mitigate. And they would do it with those. So you would do it with alcohol. So you'd start drinking with your vodka. That's one way of approaching it. Another is an alcohol replacement. And so you really don't want to drink vodka anymore, but you'd like to have an alcohol-like experience. And in that case, you would take it as a substitute for alcohol. So both are completely appropriate ways of thinking about MEAI.
Okay. So let me just recap this to make sure that I understand it before we move on. So MEAI, it is this psychedelic-like drug that was created in the lab not too long ago. We realized through chance / some intelligent people making observations that when people took it in combination with alcohol and other types of quote unquote addictions, that it induced a feeling of satiation. And seeing this effect of the compound, Clearmind Medicine is now testing the drug originally in preclinical studies to see whether or not there's something beyond just anecdotal evidence here, whether or not there's some real evidence that MEAI, which again, we need to find a better name for going forward, a cool street name for it. How about cheesecake? How about cheesecake? Given your analogy that you always do, yeah. So we're gonna give cheesecake to people going forward, and to test whether or not we actually do see these induced satiations. Do I have it more or less correct there?
Yes, and in the preclinical toxicology work, they have noticed that it works with rats. Did you know that you can make an alcoholic rat? I actually didn't know that. And they can. And alcoholic rats stop drinking when they're given MEI.
Awesome. Why don't we just very quickly, like within a minute or two, describe how these type of tests work, how we get the rats addicted to alcohol, and then how we can see that they're choosing to give up alcohol, essentially.
Well, alcohol is a physically addictive drug. If you give a physically addictive drug to any animal, they will become physically dependent on it. And so they do that with rats. And then you offer rats different things to drink. And what you notice is the alcoholic rats tend to prefer alcohol. And then you dose them with MDMA, MEAI, and then they don't prefer alcohol anymore.
I'm telling you, just call it cheesecake. It will catch on by the
Right.
end of this interview.
It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now, are we moving into human clinical trials for it?
Yes. So the intention is to work with the FDA, which is kind of called bagging the elephant, because they want to sell it in all countries. And so, Australia, Europe, North America, etc. So if you want to go big, then it's best to start with the FDA, because the FDA is the most recognized regulatory authority anywhere. They could start with Israel, they could start with Canada, but the FDA is the way to shoot for the top of the pile, and that's what they're doing. And so far, they've had very productive and positive discussions with the FDA. And so to speed the process up, they're completing the preclinical toxicology. And then the next step is safety in humans. And they proposed 2 lines of research, which is a little unusual, but it speeds the process. So there's safety in humans, which is phase 1, and there is efficacy in humans. Does it work when people who are alcoholics? And they've done a joint application to the FDA, and the FDA is welcoming that process. They haven't approved it yet, but the discussions with the FDA are going well.
So
And
just to be clear, when you say a joint application, are you talking about a phase 1/2A then to be looking at both the efficacy and the safety? Is that what we're discussing?
exactly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's the next step, and the discussions are going well.
Awesome. Do we have any sort of estimated timetable for when we should get our first safety tests going on, the first phase 1 tests? Are we looking end of this year, maybe next year?
Well, I get asked that question a lot, and I always give a rather vague answer, just because we don't know.
Right.
And the bottom line is, you don't know how the FDA is going to respond, and you don't know how long it's going to take. So it is reasonable to assume the clinical trial process is going to not take weeks, and it's not going to take months. It's going to take years, but it won't take decades. And I know that's not a precise response, but my worst fear is I give precise responses that are completely wrong.
I want the
So
exact calendar date.
it doesn't exist. Yeah, it just doesn't. It doesn't exist. So they're speeding up the process as quickly as they can. It's recognized as an urgent need. Alcoholism, I mean, the media pays a huge amount of attention to opiate use disorders because a lot of people are dying. But alcoholism is huge. If you think about potential market sizes, the number of people who are dying from alcoholism and disrupting their families and neighborhoods and their relationship with the police is absolutely huge. And so in terms of market potential, this is massive.
And not only market potential, but hypothetically, if it were to work, just societally potential, or the potential it has to help heal communities that have been absolutely decimated by
Mhm,
alcohol and then perhaps other drugs in the future as well. But
mhm.
it's honestly heartbreaking to see how many friends and neighbors that exist in our communities here in a supposedly rich nation fall to the demon drug, and in this case, it's alcohol and anything that can help.
At one point in my career, I was a trainer of the Vancouver Police Department, and I trained them for years. I had groups of 30 cops in a room again and again and again. And inevitably, I had a routine that I did. So inevitably, I would introduce the concept and I would talk about drugs, and then I would include alcohol as a drug. It is a drug. And then I would say, from a policing perspective, what is the most obnoxious drug you guys ever have to deal with? 100% of the time, it was always alcohol. If somebody's going to, the challenge of policing jobs is domestic disputes. You show up at a domestic dispute. What does that mean? It means somebody's drunk. And they often, or often enough to make their jobs very difficult, are violent. And when a cop walks in the room, they have to deal with a violent individual, and it's all about alcohol. And so if we would do our society a world of good if we could actually have a more healthy relationship with alcohol. In fact, completely honestly, James, if I was in charge of the world, I would have alcohol for sale, and MEAI would be in all of it. because what would happen then is people would enjoy alcohol, and they would enjoy a small amount of alcohol, and they probably enjoy it even more than they do it today, and then they would stop drinking. That
I
sounds like
mean,
a pretty compelling argument to me. Unfortunately, governments won't do it because their largest sales are from people who drink way too much. But from a societal point of view, it would certainly reduce the harm and the damage that alcohol does to our communities, our families, our relationships, and our bodies.
that's something to dream about. Let's hope.
Mhm,
Fingers crossed.
mhm.
So what separates MEA? See, you got me screwing up the name. Also,
Yes, yes.
MEAI
Yeah.
cheesecake. What separates cheesecake from other psychedelic drugs?
Well, if you think about the business model for most psychedelic companies, they provide a psychedelic experience for people in the context of highly regulated professionals. So, psychiatrists, psychologists, clinical social workers, nurses. And the more credentialed they are, the more expensive they are. And so the model is people take a psychedelic once, twice, maybe three times. That's the addictions model, the PTSD model, it's the depression model, it's all the same. And it's really, really expensive. And then people don't do the psychedelic very often. So the concept of MEAI is that it would be available on prescription. You would pick it up. You don't need a therapist. You don't need any supervision to take it. You take it as needed. And if you want to work on your issues and go and get therapy, psychedelic or otherwise, you can, but it's completely not part of the business model at all. So frequent use for as long as you want to take it with none of the expense of therapy. I mean, I've done the math. I know how expensive the therapies are going to be when psychedelics unfold because I've been
Thousands and
involved.
thousands and thousands.
Well, yeah, many, many thousands. So here's a psychedelic, and I use that in quotation marks. We're calling it a non-hallucinogenic psychedelic. So here's a psychedelic that people will simply get a prescription to, take as needed, as frequently as they want, with no barriers of needing to have therapy. So it's a completely different business model of the normal psychedelic business model.
It's amazing. Is there anything else before we hop off our call, Mark, that you'd like to talk about, either about Clearmind, MEAI, or another great analogy for us?
Yes. Well, one of the big differences that Clearmind has with all of the psychedelic companies is the number of patents they have. So my lifetime goal is to make psychedelics available, widely available to people. I've worked in academia, I've worked in health, I've worked in government, I've worked in many different for-profit and non-profit scenarios, and I know all of them are needed to legalize psychedelics. And in the for-profit world is needed to do clinical trials. And so companies need to succeed in order for psychedelics to be available. One of the ways companies succeed is patenting their ideas. And hopefully they do it legitimately. There are companies out there that do overbroad patents of things that we know aren't going to work.
Or
Clearmind
they
has,
will work.
well, the patents won't work.
Okay.
So the patents that Clearmind Medicine have are what I would describe as completely legitimate patents. By that I mean, they're patenting MEAI for alcoholism. Nobody had that idea before Clearmind came to the table. So it has a wide range of patents that really protect the ideas, which will allow the company to succeed in the world of psychedelic medicine.
Fantastic. Well, I am super excited to see what Clearmind does going forward. They're one of the smaller companies in the psychedelics industry that's really caught my eye because you guys are doing something unique, different. You have a compound that nobody else really is even talking about. I had never heard it before I stumbled onto your company. So I am really excited by the potential of this compound. And I'm really excited to see where the company is going to go from here in the next year, 2 years.
James, let's stay in touch. I will keep
Let's
you in
stay
the
in
loop.
touch.
Yeah.
Alrighty, guys. And if you enjoyed this video, actually, before I give my little like and subscribe dance, where can people find out more about Clearmind, Mark?
Well, it trades currently on 4 different stock markets: the Frankfurt FSE, the Canada CSE, the American OTC, and they're setting themselves up to trade on NASDAQ. But Clearmind Medicine, if you Google it, you can go into their website and see all the details.
Awesome. Fantastic. So, if everybody enjoyed this episode, if you want to learn more about MEAI, check out their website. And if you want to see more of PsycBiz, make sure you like and subscribe. It really does help the channel. Anyhow, guys, I'm James, and I'll see you next time.